Well, welcome everybody. You have made it almost to the end of camp. I'm glad to see faces out here for the 2:15 in the afternoon on Saturday session. So we're talking about building great teams, and specifically by great I mean teams that outperform others, that have high morale, that have people that are happy on them, that are effective above and beyond the norm in the organizations that they're in, and some of the characteristics of those teams and how to develop the right kinds of skills and atmospheres and environments to have these things emerge and exist. So, real briefly, my name's Drew. I've been doing web things for quite a while, but I've had a variety of different roles and different kinds of teams. So, a developer, a CEO, a product owner. Now I work at Pantheon, where I do agency and community outreach, and I'm Gorton on Twitter. In addition to all of this, though, I've been a roofer, I've worked in fast food, I've worked in manufacturing, I've been a bookkeeper. All of these things in life and all these different places have given me a number of perspectives. But over the last probably 10 years or so, I've basically been management. And in that time, have realized that actually what I ought to probably do is focus on how to manage. And what does that mean? And what kinds of things do I want out of my team? So I've spent a lot of time over the last 10, maybe 15 years reading a lot, and so what I'm presenting here aren't really my own ideas so much as synthesizing lots of things that I've picked up from different sources. And I include some resources at the end, and these slides will be available on the site once we're done. So if there are books and other things there that are interesting to you that I that I happen to mention, those will be in the slides. So today, I love the idea of controlling via your phone, but I hate it when it jumps ahead unexpectedly. Anyways, so we're going to be talking about 4 different aspects of great teams. So specifically, what is we're going to talk about what it is to be a great team and what the characteristics of that team are. But then the individuals that are on those teams, the people on those teams, what it means to manage a great team for those of us who might manage or aspire to be a manager someday, what our roles are in particular, and then all of us, we all want to be on great teams. What are the things that we ought to expect out of ourselves? And then hopefully we should have time for a fair amount of questions and conversation. I hope to move through those first four things in about 30 minutes, and then we can have good dialogue afterwards. Also, as we're going, though, if people have things to raise. This is a small enough group, I think we can be conversational. We all have insights that can help the rest of us. So, great teams. What are the ingredients of great teams? So, there are 5 really common ingredients on great teams. A shared purpose, distributed power, diversity, good communications, and the concept of the right people in the right seats. So, let's talk about shared purpose. Great teams share a purpose and they know what that is. Why does this team exist? What do you do better than anyone else? If you can agree on where you're going and why, you have that shared purpose fuels everything you do. And I would say having it be sort of plain spoken and natural and actually speaking to the humans that we all are is really important. So I'm going to look at 2 examples. So on the left we have Nike saying, Nike's purpose is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. And oh, by the way, when we say athlete, we mean if you have a body, you're an athlete. Compare with the Adidas Group, strives to be the global leader in the sporting goods industry with brands built on a passion for sports and a sporting lifestyle. I'm just curious. I have some opinions about these, but if there were only 2 companies in the world that you could work for, as of right now, at least let's do this thought experiment, how many of you would be interested in working for Nike? Just show of hands. All right, anyone interested in working for Adidas? All right, interesting. For me, I also go to Nike, but that's really interesting that I think, just to repeat, like the results I saw, I think maybe 75% of the room raised their hands for Nike. Was anyone not sure? Actually, did anybody have no opinion? All right, and we have at least 1 abstain. These things don't speak to me at all. So as I look at this, I think the first one speaks to me as a human being about like sort of having a passion for doing something, and sort of this free, broad, open sort of focus. And you see that in Nike in the way they do things. Like they used to sell shoes, but now I don't know. It's just a swoosh all over the place. Whereas Adidas is very focused. We're going to be big, and we're going to build these massive brands. And by setting up that purpose, they have already attracted us in different ways, right? We self-selected. And having that be something that you can put out there into the world, having a purpose, whether that, and none of us have a marketing budget as big as Nike or Adidas, but when someone comes to interview or when someone is talking in the team meeting, like, why are we doing this? What's the next thing we're doing? If you can come back to a statement like this and know what it is, that's going to drive your team, your group, to be as effective as it possibly can. So, shared purpose. Great teams also distribute power. So, a lot of times we see org charts that are like, if I were to say draw an org chart, I think a lot of us would draw like the box at the top, and then we've seen the boxes down below, and the boxes down below, and boxes down below. And that modeling of org charts is based on a command and control idea. And it's pretty antiquated, and it's actually, it's a really bad mental model for those of us who are in the services industry, who are involved doing things that involve creativity or problem solving. And it's actually, and I think probably most of us here at a Drupal camp are involved, work for an organization that is in fact doing creativity, attempting to solve problems creatively. And it's a much better idea to reverse this mental model. So there's a, this article here is a nice resource on it, but the idea that actually what managers and CEOs and other things like that, other people, other roles like that do, is actually they are underneath the people who are on the front lines doing the work, and what their job is to support them. They are like the root system. The important part is are the people on the front lines doing the work. So great teams distribute power by giving power out to the edges, out to the folks who are on the floor, talking to customers out in the field, and asking, what do you think we should do? And then acting on it together. Asking that of the people who are out going to camps, going to conferences, doing the work, developing, project managing, etc. Another aspect of great teams is diversity. And this is kind of like the diversity that Erin was talking about yesterday. So she mentioned we need to have more diversity in terms of like all kinds of things. So oftentimes when we talk about diversity, there's gender and race and religion. Well, gender and race certainly come up all the time. But there are lots of other ways that we can be diverse. And it turns out that diversity is a hallmark of high-performing teams. And in 2012, Credit Suisse did a global analysis of 2,400 companies. And they found that organizations with at least one female board member yielded a return on equity and higher net income growth than those that did not have any women on the board. That's Credit Suisse. They have about $10 billion worth of assets under management. Actually, I think it's higher than that. But anyways, a lot of money that they manage on behalf of others. They found that simply having a woman on the board was enough to predict a better outcome financially for a company. These folks are kind of hard-nosed, just evaluating the numbers. So why is this? This is something that's been studied actually a fair amount, and I think we all know that we're maybe familiar with the idea, like, all right, a diverse group of people will bring different viewpoints, and then you get better ideas and better dialogue and those kinds of things. And that is in fact one aspect of diversity. But there's another really powerful aspect of diversity that is actually been studied and shown to actually be more powerful, and that is, if I know I'm going to be going into a situation where the people around me, like I'm going into a meeting, for example, and presenting an idea, and I know that people in that meeting have a different background than me, I do my work much better, much harder. I prepare harder. I question my own assumptions. I think about that like, well, oh, maybe, I don't know, is that true? Oh, I should research that. And this factor, it makes everybody work a little bit harder. There's like, it is hard to prepare to talk to others and such, but this work is actually what makes better results. You question yourself and your own assumptions. And it's incredibly powerful. It's not just gender and race. It's religion. It's age. It's something as, and all of those things are like strongly, sort of identifying. But I would say something as shallow, quote unquote, as politics. Even in a highly polarized society today, people are, strongly identified perhaps with one political party or another. But that's also something that can change over time. If you believe one set of sort of political beliefs, and you know that you're presenting to a group of people that have a mixed or different opinions than you, same effect is shown to be true. So again, like as Aaron was saying, diversity is not simply choosing people who look different than you, but think different than you, have different backgrounds. In my own team, we have a little bit of diversity in WordPress and Drupal, which is wild and crazy. But again, it actually works. I see it having an effect. I see us thinking about our things, our words and our statements and our judgments and what we're doing much harder. So powerful. Great teams communicate well, and this is something that's also been studied quite a bit as well. And there's this idea of mapping out the way communications work in an organization, and it turns out, again, quite well studied, when you map out who interacts with whom on a regular basis, good communication structures look something like the graph that's shown here. And they're highlighting a particular role. This is a role called gap bridger sort of role. But so you can pay a lot of money to have consultants come into your organization and figure out, and they'll sit in the meetings and see who's talking to who and who's sending emails to whom and whatnot. But it turns out when you have messes like this, sort of, that are demonstrating the kinds of interactions people are, these teams are much more effective than highly structured, we talk in this meeting, and that look a little more org chartish, right? So when people are only communicating inside their particular group, and that's where they're, we stay here, this is what we do, we talk about these things, one person talks to somebody else, that's it. Those teams don't do as well. Has anyone here ever been in a meeting or maybe has a meeting where you go to the meeting and it's everyone in the meeting talks for 5 minutes and sort of gives a status report on what they're doing? Has anyone else ever had one of those meetings? And I'm not, so those meetings are terrible. And I'm not talking actually about the agile process of a daily stand-up, right, which actually has some real purpose to it. But something that goes for an hour, and it's like, I'm going to talk for 5 minutes, and everybody's checking their email, while the other, get rid of that meeting. It's a really bad meeting. If we're each just going to report for 10 minutes and everybody else is paying attention to something else, get rid of it. It's a bad meeting. There's probably something there that's still useful, but figure out what that something is, focus on an efficient way to do that, and have that single communication here, single communication there, and move on. Don't waste everybody's time. And one way to do that is to make sure that the people, if you have a meeting that's a regular meeting, make sure that the agenda is one that others can add to on a regular basis. Have a mechanism for that. It's not, asks permission. It's ideally, we set the agenda here in this one place. Anybody can add to it. We work through things in priority, and then we move on. If we run out of time, pick it up next week. If we don't, great. We just finished early. So, effective communications. All right, the great teams also have the concept of the right people in the right seats. And this has been called a lot of things, but this is the terminology used by Jim Collins in the book Good to Great. So this idea, and so if you Google for right people, right seats, you'll find all kinds of articles talking about this. But the idea is that you have sort of two important things at play. Finding the right people, again, someone who's going to be effective in your organization. They know that they're in line with the values and whatnot, but then also that they're in the right seats. So If you have someone who doesn't like talking to people, but they're just a super fantastic person, you really like them, they shouldn't be doing sales, right? There are roles that we can put people in that are not a match for their skills. Everybody has skills, and different roles simply require different skills. It's not about the person being a bad person or ineffective or something like that. They might be ineffective in a role, but it shouldn't be a judgment of them as a person. So separate out the person and the role and align the two. And if someone's failing and not doing a good job, and you let them linger in that sort of unhappy state, you're not doing anybody a favor. They know they're not doing well. Everybody else on the team knows they're not doing well. If you're doing that because you think it's like, I don't want to handle it's sort of a messy situation, I'm not sure, etc. The longer you let that sort of linger, it's going to infect your organization and your team, and you will lose productivity and happiness and morale and all of the other things that make teams great. So don't let failure linger. It hurts everyone and everything you're doing. So, shared purpose, distributed power, diversity, good communication, and the right people in the right seats. So, if you have all of those things firing, you're going to have a team that's performing very well. Teams that are performing very well tend to grow over time, right? Because they're being so successful, their input and outputs start growing. You need to add people to the team. So, what does that look like? Well, if you're going to try and find the right people, you need to know the seats that they're going to sit in. You need to understand your values, interview for those things, both, and then really understand motivation. So, identifying the right seats. When everyone is busy and full and things are going well, you're happy and such, but you're also at that sort of stress point of like, we need more people to do things. The first thing you should ask actually is, what are we doing right now that we can let go of? Is there something we're doing that actually isn't that important? Similarly, as you take a look at things like, well, we're doing all of this, is there anything we're missing though? What can individuals give to each other? So if all of us are collectively a team, for example, if we all write down the things that I like doing, so let's say we all write down 10 bullet points of things that we do. Here's the things that I do. Circle some that you really wouldn't mind handing off to someone else. Catalog that as a group. Realize, wait, there's a whole bunch of stuff. If I was able to focus on these 8 things I really like, these other, here we are 10, 15, 20 people or something like that. We've got 20 bullet points times 2. Put that together and see, wait, is that a role that someone else could really dive into and enjoy? And similarly, what do you want to do more of? This is all the same kind of exercise. I discovered this as an exercise early in my career and was really fortunate to sort of like stumble into this method. But it's a really effective way to say, let people focus in on the things that they do really well and enjoy doing and want to do more of, and at the same time, hand over and create space for someone new to come in and fill some of the gaps that you have. So, you identify that seat. Then it's time to figure out, how do we find somebody? And before you do that, you really need to know your values. And by values, I mean things like, examples like trustworthiness or teamwork or passion. And I'm curious, does anybody here work for an organization that has like clearly stated values that they would just volunteer as what are our values? What do you got? I'm gonna call on you, Dan.
Yes, sir.
Do you have values that you've?
Yes. You want me to list some of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
For example.
I think one of our core values is straight talk. So straight talk.
Straight talk. Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Anybody else want to volunteer a value that they have? Yeah.
We only have 3.
Good.
Trust, team, and excellence.
Yeah. Great. Trust, team, and excellence. Those are actually really close to ours. Cool. Anybody else have?
Customer first.
Customer first is a common one. So, those things are great to have alignment internally on, but it's really important when you're talking to someone new out there, when you start asking questions in a structured way, which we'll talk about in a moment, listen for the indicators that they also have those same values intrinsically. So it's straight talk, or it's customers come first, things like that. Design your processes, your questions around things that can surface those values or the lack thereof. Now, specifically for interviewing, there are 4 kinds of things that we should all do in an interview. The 4 kinds of questions that we should all ask. And the first 2 are kind of easy, and I think it's kind of we often maybe over-focus on these. Do you know how to do X? Or do you know what DNS is? Or do you know blah, blah, blah? And a skills assessment is show me how you do this. Like, are you able to write a line of PHP? Are you able to debug this kind of server problem? Whatever those are. But behavioral and situational are really, really important, and they can actually really help sort of take out unconscious bias. We all have unconscious bias. We all, that's just like a fact of the human condition. And if you ask structured behavioral questions, behavioral looks back. Like, tell me about something you have done before that dealt with a situation. So tell me a time when you were trying to debug a program and you just couldn't get to the end. Or tell me about a time when you were dealing with a client that was very unhappy. And again, that sort of speaks to, have they experienced these things? Let them tell their story. And then, equally important, none of us is done, right? We're all still growing and learning and improving. Give people a chance to sort of talk about how they would do something if it came up. So what would you do if a client of yours was very angry about about this situation? So set up questions in all 4 categories, but spend the most of your time in behavioral and situational. And again, this is via management consulting and all kinds of things. You can Google for more on all of these kinds of things. It's really important to understand motivation, right? So if you're going to ask someone to join your team, they've got your values. You know they're going to be in the right seat. You've found that this person has all of the things. Understand what motivates people. Has anyone here seen or read the book Drive by Daniel Pink, perhaps, or seen a TED Talk? This is a really interesting TED Talk. There are a couple hands. It's definitely worth watching. It's 10, 15 minutes. The book is even better, but it won't take you that long to read. It goes into it a lot more. This talk opens with a description of an experiment that's been run many times since the 1940s. And the experiment is one that is, you set up a situation, you have 100 people come through, like college students or whatnot, and say, that it's basically a puzzle to solve. You need to put certain things in certain places in a way that's not really very intuitive, how you're going to get to the end state. And you give that test to 100 people. Say like, hey, first, welcome. We're doing a thing. We just want to see how long it takes the average person to do this, solve this puzzle. You go through, 100 people go through, and come back with a time. Then you talk to another group of 100 people. You say, hey, so we want you to solve this problem, and in addition to sort of measuring your time, we're giving a bonus to the top performers. If you are the fastest person, you will get $20, some sum of money. If you're in the top 75% of people, you'll get $10, something like that. Does anybody want to venture a guess as to the differences between the averages in those 2 groups? So the group A, who's doing it for just kind of almost as a game, and group B that could win money if they got it. Anybody want to venture any sort of level of guess?
First group.
First group. The one doing it for fun was on average 30 to 40% faster. That is crazy, right? We're all living in a capitalistic society. Wait, that's wrong. That's not the way we do this. But this experiment has been repeated hundreds, if not thousands of times around the world for different sums of money. So, researchers at a university, $20, maybe not a lot, but you take this to a third world country where $20 or $50 or $100 could actually be a significant sum. Same results. It's uncanny. And it turns out for problems, there is actually a kind of situation where that performance actually is it does set people up for success. But it's for rote mechanical tasks. It's like putting bottles on a manufacturing line as it goes by, for example. If you incent people in a situation where you know exactly what to do every single time, and you just do it faster, you'll get paid more, that works. But if you want to have something, a situation where people are trying to struggle and figure out problems, and it's not obvious exactly how you do this, those tasks, financial, if-then, sort of, if you do this, then you get that kind of benefit, does not help. It hurts. Instead of financial motivations or if-then rewards, the science tells us that people want 3 different things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And that these are the things that motivate all of us. If you think about it, autonomy is just simply the ability to do good work on, like, I don't have to ask for permission. I know what the thing to do is. I'm going to do it. No one, it's not like, and if you think about that, yeah, that's the way all of us want to work, right? Mastery. I want to get better at this over time. I want to have the option, and maybe it's the opportunity to focus on a particular aspect of this, but, I'm starting today as a junior programmer. Someday, I want to be like some amazing, I want to be like Aaron. I could maybe be like that and have a chance to grow over time. That's mastery. And then purpose is the chance to, the knowledge that your work is going towards something. And again, that speaks to organizational purpose. My work is going to help make this organization more effective. I know what this organization is about. This purpose resonates with me. This is how we derive purpose. All right, so that's right. The right great characters as great teams, finding great people. For those of us who manage others, we have, or want to someday maybe be managers, we have a number of responsibilities. So let's dive in. So seek the thorny issues. So managers should be looking for the nastiest problems and going after them. That's what managers should be doing. The people who are doing the work every day are being asked to do the work every day and get it done and be effective. And over time, there's little friction spots and other things that are sort of build up. Everyone's really aware of it, but because of what you're asking people to do every day and still be effective, they don't have a chance to solve that. That's what managers need to solve. You need to figure out, hey, we seem to be at cross purposes here between these two teams. Or, this has been a lot of projects that we've run and we've gone over budget for some reason. That's not on the people. That's what managers need to solve. Managers need to find this yucky problem that no one wants to touch. If that's the sign, I'm not sure how we're going to fix that. That's what managers need to go after. Set your sights on those things. Managers also need to get out of the middle, right? The more stuff that flows through a particular individual, and a lot of managers will, there's almost like a false pride, perhaps, in knowing all of these things. I'm the person who weighs in on these things and all these things, and I make the decisions about this and everything else. Everyone's waiting on you. If you set that up in some sort of falsely egotistical way of I'm really important because everything goes through me, that's really bad. It's a bad sign. Don't be a bottleneck. Again, clear roadblocks. Devolve your power. If things are coming through you, too many things are coming your way. Actually, there's a book that I actually didn't include in the resources, but it talks about. Has anyone read the book about the metaphor is monkeys on backs? If somebody could, all right, anyways, I won't ask people to Google it. It'll come to me, no doubt, right as we finish. But the idea that people come in with a problem and they try to leave it with you, and that is the proverbial monkey on their back. And so if you find that too many things are running through a particular, yourself, it really is where you get to fix this, really, you need to ask people, well, what do you think we should do about that? Okay, so you're coming to me with a problem, what should we do about that? Okay, listen to that, think about it, use your knowledge, but give them the power. Okay, great. I agree. Yeah, we should do that. Go for it. That's yours. And the idea is, again, from this book, which is otherwise is a trite, simple little book, but it makes this a point quite effectively, that you need to make sure that you give people the opportunities to solve their own problems. When there are praise and blame to go around, praise belongs with your team, right? When things are going well, you need to make sure, like, that belongs with your team. If things are not going well, managers own that. And that's real. Like, that means that we've let too much friction build up, for example, and we haven't tried to solve the thorny problems. But sometimes there'll be an issue with a person or such. When you have an issue with a person, you need to address those privately. Praise publicly, address issues privately. Now, there may be, that probably goes in the 80-20 rule and 90-10 rule. There might be a situation where somebody's actually particularly motivated by a word in public, but almost all the time, you want to praise publicly and address issues privately. Another thing that we need to do as managers, that people should do as managers, is be able to model the behaviors you want from someone else. So if you're asking people to behave and act in a certain way or do things in a certain way, you need to be able to do that too. And if, for example, you're managing developers or designers or other things, you might not be, in fact, I hope you're not as good as the people who are actually doing those specific things. But you at least ought to understand what goes into those tasks. So, all right, I'm not a programmer, but I'm asking people to, like, if that's the situation you're in, you're not a programmer, but you're managing programmers, take a little class, do a little study, do something, understand, figure out how to do hello world in JavaScript or something like that. Make sure that you can do the kinds of things that you expect from others. And that's both behavioral as well as skills. Another thing that management needs to do, like a role of management, is to talk with people as people. So I don't know if anyone has ever worked in an organization where a new policy comes out from somewhere, and it's obviously trying to, like, wait, they just changed the policy. I think that's about the thing that Jim does. Or I think, are they just like targeting Karen here? Because actually that thing is that, she does is really annoying or whatever. But suddenly it's written into a policy guide handbook, and it's kind of confusing and obtuse. In the meantime, Jim or Karen or whomever it is that was trying to, that we're trying to edge out or whatever, isn't really aware that that's what's going on even. It's a super passive-aggressive way of dealing with people problems. Don't do that. If you have an issue with a person, don't write a policy. Talk to the person. Then maybe you can write a policy. Maybe it's good to write things down, because the reason organizations evolve policy handbooks and guidelines is because life is fuzzy and there are all sorts of gray areas, and sometimes you write down things that need to be really clear. But talk to people. Don't do it with policies. All right, and then for all of us who aspire to be on a great team, we each have a part. These things don't happen because management set it up and other things. We have a role. I have a role. You have a role. If you want to be on a great team, you need to make sure that you have a growth mindset. We are all growing. None of us is done. This term growth mindset comes from, I think her name is Carol Dweck. And she's got, I think the book might be just great, growth mindset. But it's talking about, the opposite of a growth mindset is saying, I'm not a math person. Defining yourself by what you're not, right? You could be. That's the point of what she says. Like, you might not be right now, it might not be the favorite thing, but are you just closing off your own ability to explore this by defining yourself by the things that you're not? Don't do that. So if you want to, for example, on a personal level as well, let's say I want to lose some weight, which is both theoretically and actually true. It's better, it's far more effective to start a small change that you can do every single day. Like, I'm going to eat less potato chips. After dinner, I'm not going to do this, or whatever. Rather than saying, I'm going to lose 20 pounds, or whatever, and then setting that as my goal. You make a small change in the way that you behave, and over time that becomes a habit, and it becomes really natural, and it works. So habit forming is always, effective habits start with small changes. Another thing that's really important is the language that we use. We versus I versus they. If you're talking about your organization as they, that's a problem. If you're talking about, if one of your values is teamwork and you're constantly talking about I, that's a problem. Language, action, and thought are all really closely related. And language is the place to start. So, if you want to be a great team, start thinking about we. Use that word instead of I or they. And lastly, as an individual, if you see something that you think needs to change on your team or in your organization, it's on you to change it, right? You should start changing. What do I do that enables this pattern that I don't like? Start being the change you want, which is it's an easy thing to say, and it's, I think, often trivialized and such, but I think it's really very true. Change the things you can, and let others know why you're doing it. And you might be surprised that actually, if you do that, somebody else will pick up on a spot, and that change starts coming together. And rather than complaining about or being unhappy with something indefinitely, small changes organically make these things happen over time. All right, so that's what I wanted to talk about. Great teams, people, management, and selves. I mentioned there are a couple of books. I recommend all of these. There's a lot of others out there. And again, these will all be, this is in the slides. The slides will be posted on this page when we're done. But that's what I wanted to talk about. So, thank you. Anybody want to talk about any of that or have questions?
How do you find good people?
Well, so good people is, like super subjective. I would say, again, before you say, I want to find good people, you have to figure out two important things. And I think you're asking for, sort of like where did it go? So identifying the seats and knowing your values. I'll just go back to here. So what are they good for? What are the seats? So, all right, how do you find good people? Well, what roles, what skills, what are we going to be asking of the good people, or the person that we want to be good? There's going to be a role. They can't just come in and be like the best baseball pitcher ever. That's not probably going to do a lot of good for what I think you would like, right? So figure out exactly what it is that you want those folks to do, and then understand your values really deeply. Because good for you might be bad for you, might be bad for this organization, might be amazing over here. And so once you've got those two things really clear, I think you might have been asking like monster.com or go to camps and interview, all of these things. So I'll ask you actually to clarify. I'll cut my answer there. And
You need a programmer, you need a graphic designer.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Where do those people go? Where do those people go? What do those people do? So find out where those people are. So if you need to hire a Drupal developer, come to a Drupal camp, right? Talk to a lot of people. Make it known that you're hiring a Drupal developer. If you're trying to find a graphic designer and you're not a graphic designer, do some research. All right, where do these people, are there groups? Is the AIGA, there's a monthly meetup. Aha, I should go to that. You might find a lot of people at a meetup like that that are also looking for a developer, say, if you're looking to sort of combine. So find those people, figure out where they are, and you can do that both in person and online. And LinkedIn is actually a really useful tool I've come to appreciate over time too. Anybody else? All right, cool. All right, I'm going to just throw a couple of words out for, okay. If you wouldn't mind, I don't know if folks have been doing this, but both this session and others, if you go to Joined In and just share your feedback, that's really helpful for everybody, camp organizers, speakers, et cetera, and very much appreciated. So if you wouldn't mind sharing your feedback, that helps me get better at this and everyone else who's doing the same things. And then the last thing I wanted to say is we've got sprints tomorrow at Olson, and it really is a great opportunity to come and give back and just sort of work collaboratively on this whole project that is Drupal. And again, if you can write or edit or English, right? That's a really valuable skill. I don't know how many of you tried looking at our documentation. It's going to be one of our focuses. So coming with new eyes to say, I don't understand this phrase, or other things like that, that's actually a really, really valuable contribution. Or if you're like a really super sweet, amazing PHP programmer, we've got stuff for that too. And everything in between. So everyone's welcome, and hopefully most of you can make it. So that's it.